For example, research has it that no nation on earth funds its security through budgetary allocation. How true is that? Well, you have to answer me. Give an example. I think Brazil and America. Now, what is your view on that? Is that to be compared to the Nigerian armed forces?
Well, the issue of insecurity is a global phenomenon. Now we are perhaps remember the recent report of the ISIS and also the ISWAP moving towards this side, and perhaps the fear begin to rise. Though the military came out recently to douse that tension. Very kudos to them, at least to perhaps take that fear off the shoulder of the populace. But again, it is like this. You must not perhaps do away with the fact that funding the military, it's enormous. The US, for instance, spends billions of dollars funding the military. This is aside, perhaps, the external wars they fund every year. Also, you mentioned countries like Brazil, the Kuwaits of this world, and also the other countries that are facing the same thing. There is no way we can't continue in this country to fund the military from our budget. Except we don't want to tell ourselves the truth. We must begin to perhaps devise a means of getting another, or perhaps another kind of funding to help the military. Like I said, the military, as we see it now, so some they will tell you that they are overstretched. How then can you help them to mitigate against these insurgents and perhaps the insecurity?
Are you suggesting the public-private partnership with the armed forces?
It will definitely not be a bad idea. It will not be a bad idea, because also, aside the fact that it will aid their performance, it will also help in auditing and also accountability. Remember, in the past, you just read it in your script just now, that we are still grappling with the anti-graft war against those that were shouldered with responsibility, or perhaps doing all of this before. So if we must do away with that, if we are bringing, the thing is this: if I am a private investor, I want to know where my money is going, and I want to know what I'm gaining from it. So if I have a company somewhere in a local community, and I am contributing to the security of this country, by extension, that community, I deserve to be secured, my property, and even my market, talking about the people living in that area.
Now, with the coronavirus that has actually come to stay, do you think this is very much possible?
Well, yes, I know the fact. It means that even before the coronavirus, no thanks to the coronavirus pandemic that came to the world as a shock, it's a global thing, not just peculiar to Nigeria. But again, we must give kudos to our leaders. This is just by the way, because by the reports and what they gave about Africa, by now I think you and I might not be in the studio. But kudos to our leaders, and perhaps in this part of the world, who has taken it, talking about the fight of coronavirus very seriously. And also kudos to the populace too, who are abiding by this thing. It has really affected it. Why? Oil, that is our major commodity in this part of the world, already is lean, talking about the resources coming from there. And before now, the resources have always been scarce. There have never been enough resources. So funding the military adequately might be challenging because of the coronavirus pandemic. But I believe, like every other person, I am optimistic that soon we'll definitely do away with it, and coronavirus will be a thing of the history, and also we'll begin to get better revenue sources. But again, like I said, you must give it to this leadership, or the leadership of this administration. They are really doing their best. Diversification of the economy alone also takes the burden completely off the oil that have been our sole dependent internal revenue generating resources before. Now that we are diversifying into the economy, it will be a very good one. And again, like I said earlier, we can actually go into more bilateral relationship with some other countries that we already have existing one with, or perhaps the ones that we can actually explore. Because if you look at the trade volume and balance, I won't say balance because it's actually imbalance. Take for instance now our trade relationship with countries like some countries in Europe, like the Norway. If you are importing 2/3 of the tons of fish, for instance, as a commodity you need for the consuming populace of your country, it's actually not a good one. So if we have Norwegian countries here, for instance, who are helping for mass production of fish, it will aid and also help our own currency. Because if you are always importing, there is no way it will not affect your currency at the international markets.
All right, with the existing policies already existing in the armed forces, how then can we effectively implement the already, something to help fight against insecurity?
It's a continuous process. It is a continuous process. Like we were discussing before we came on air. It might not.
Do you think an idea can be imputed
yeah,
to help fight against?
That's why the every now and then, take technology for instance. Every now and then there is always a rebuild.
Do you see the Nigerian Armed Forces open to such ideas?
I am very sure, because if it comes to an end today, the glory goes to them. Just like it has been going to them in the peacekeeping. Nigerian army, Nigerian military, by extension, is one of the best in the African continent, and by extension. So if now we're having these challenges internal, it's just because it's not because it's beyond them. It's just because of perhaps some factors that might maybe invariably beyond them. But the fact, I still believe that if all hands on deck, it's not just for the security agents alone. If I and you play the role we are supposed to play very well to help them, it is their duty to go after these people, because you aren't armed, I'm not armed. It is their training and their calling to go there, finish the work, and perhaps nip these elements in the boat.
All right, in 1 minute on the final note, how would you describe the current leadership of the armed forces, and what do you think they can do to get better?
Well, the only room that is that cannot be ever exhausted is the room for improvement. I believe they can still do better. I believe very well that things can get better. Yes, when the last administration, we also clamored the same thing. Change the service chief became an anthem, and perhaps at the end of the day...
Was that the solution?
We can't see now that it's actually not a solution. Yes, some people might tell you that do away with them, let fresh hands come. But the fact remains that, like I said, even if these current service chiefs leave, they will leave. They will leave. It's not a birthright. They will definitely leave at perhaps when it is time for them to leave. When it is time for them to leave. Even if fresh ones come, when I mean fresh ones now, the ones that will be their successor, what's the guarantee do we have? But again, it all boils down to us giving them the maximum support, the legislative backing, the community backing. If you are harboring a criminal in your community, and somebody who has military training just come to that place, it is difficult for the person to actually go there, because one, he or she aren't a spirit to go there. What will help the person? Intelligence. If it comes to perhaps technology, intelligence also will help the person to say, look, this is where you should actually pinpoint and be your target at the end of the day, so as to avoid civilian and perhaps unnecessary casualties.
All right, many thanks for coming on the show. I'm Collins Ajibola, media journalist and consultant. And that's how we end it for today. Remember to be patriotic, have passion for your country, be vigilant in your community, contribute with all of your strength towards the safety and development of the nation. Report those activities that will pose as security challenges to security operatives. Provide relevant information to security agencies when carrying out investigation on certain security threatening activities. Advise the people around you to do the same and be good citizens of our dear country. Thank you for being part of today's edition. I am Dakore Ekpendu. See you next week.